The Akashic Records, very simply, is the library of high vibration where every soul's blueprint is kept. So we have access to the past, to the parallel timelines and dimensions, and we can see future possibilities. Now, when we say future, it is possibilities because nothing is set in stone because of human free will on this planet and in others, I'm sure, too.
Welcome to Don't Step on the Bluebells, the podcast where personal healing and transformation take center stage. I'm your host, Amanda Parker, and I'm a fellow seeker on the journey of personal growth. Join me as I delve into the stories of gifted healers, guides, and everyday people who have experienced remarkable transformations. Listen in as they share their practical wisdom to enrich your everyday life. And don't forget to hit subscribe and never miss a new episode. Welcome to today's episode of Don't Step on the Bluebells. I'm here with the incredibly talented Marcia Canestrano, who is a KRI certified Kundalini yoga teacher and also a remarkable Akashic Records reader. And I really emphasize the remarkable because you and I were connected through the absolute highest regard for the work that you do by a mutual contact of ours. So I am so excited to have you here to have this conversation, Marcia.
Oh, thank you. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to be here and to just sit in this beautiful space and to bring through whatever wisdom is for all of our best and highest good.
Oh, I love that. And I'm really excited because I have known really only peripherally about the Akashic Records. And I know we're going to dive so much into that today, but for me, it's an area I've really been curious about, having heard, the words and the ideas and insights of what is possible for so long, but never really actually getting to touch on it in a meaningful way. Before we dive into the heart of what you do, if there's anything that you're particularly excited about in your life right now.
Oh, yeah, because I am planning a beautiful trip to go to Glastonbury and then to go to Scotland afterward with one of my soul sisters. And so this is something that's been really calling to me. And I was supposed to go with another soul sister in 2020 in July, and we know how that worked out. And so here I am, but it's like the universe just brought everything back around for us to do this together. And the information, like the guidance came through. I was in a psilocybin ceremony. And it's like, oh, I knew this friend was going. And it's like, you need to invite yourself to go along. And then I was getting all the big download to go to Glastonbury. And she's like, oh, I'm supposed to go to Glastonbury with this training that I'm doing. So, it was totally synchronistic. So I'm extraordinarily excited about that. And every time that we go, and do any of this kind of work, which I know at these holy sites in particular, what we're working with is not only like, oh yeah, it's my soul lineage, it's my ancestral healing, but it's also for humanity throughout time and space. And we are allowing ourselves to step into this energy to raise the consciousness of this planet and any who choose to participate in this journey with us. So I've been really focused on this past year, on all my individual clients, but like the big thing, I went to Costa Rica at the end of May, beginning of June. So I was there. And this is the first time I've been able to travel internationally since 2020. And things have come back around. And so now I'm so excited to be able to use my passport that I renewed in 2018. And to catch up on everything I was going to do 4 years ago.
Well, I guess you're catching up, but you're also probably coming at a more important time for reasons maybe most of us don't understand that you might have a better sense of.
To some extent, but it's all I surrender. I'm being called, I show up.
So that's really powerful. I've noticed in my own life that there's often times where I feel really drawn to go visit different places. I don't necessarily know why. And especially before I started my own like spiritual journey, I would just get the sense, oh, I really want to, I don't know, go to the Philippines, or I really want to be in Sri Lanka, or, and I would be booking these trips completely last minute without having an idea, but just knowing everything was going to be fine and work out well. So is that when you say that you feel really called to, let's say, go to Glastonbury, or is that what this is for you, or what is that?
Definitely. It's definitely a soul calling. I mean, it's tied in directly to my Akashic record. I have had many lifetimes as a priestess. And so I'm being called back in this lifetime to the scenes of where I was a priestess. And Avalon was a huge place for me. And when I first read The Mists of Avalon, like back in the late 80s, because that's how old I am, I almost when it had, and like even reading The Mists of Avalon, I mean, I can take this back now 25 years. And people, when that book came out, I think it was like 85, 86, I was young, and people were like, you have to read this book. I was not in this world at all. And people kept on saying to me, you have to read this book. You have to read this book. And I mean, strangers, like, or people I was on set with, you know, just walk up to me. And when I finally got around to reading it, I was sitting on the beach in Cape Cod, and my poor friend, like I just like couldn't take my eyes off of the book. Thank God, like she was hungover. You know? So we were all kind of low energy, and I was too, you know, and so we were really super low. And it's just like, when I entered that world of Avalon, I just knew it in my heart of hearts that I had been there. And I had been, you know, in contact with and working for the Lady of the Lake in one capacity or another. And so I also, a beautiful dear sister of mine, she and I did a Wachuma ceremony together. I think it was 2000. It's San Pedro.
Okay. Yeah.
It's Wachuma or San Pedro. And
so it's a psychedelic ceremony.
Yes, it was a shamanic psychedelic ceremony. Yeah. We did it up in Berkeley with a shaman who had come through, you know, the lineage. Both she and I started after the ceremony getting all these messages about a lifetime that we had in Avalon together. And so it was like, wow, just total confirmation. And now it's finally like, okay, now I'm actually going to go to the place that I had this lifetime. And so I've had that. Like when I went to Egypt, I knew I had to go to Egypt. And I had all kinds of like, you know, visions of me as a priestess, me in a lifetime, you know, whether it was the Temple of Hathor, whether it was at Sekhmet, whether it was the Temple of Isis. So I very much am in that synchronistic listening pattern. And if I don't listen, you know, it's like better just to listen. You know, I don't get punished, but it's like, oh yeah, I knew I was supposed to do that. You know, something comes back around, it's like, okay. And, you know, so this is a part of like me working with my Akashic records. Now, some people actually come to me and they ask like, you know, I'm just getting this pull to go to Egypt this year, or India will come through, or, you know, Wisconsin, whatever it is. And, you know, and so it's like, oh yeah. And then sometimes I'll see the lifetimes that are calling them back. And this is where the healing can come in. The revelations as well as the resolutions of what the wisdom is through that lifetime. And so that's a part of the big work that I have been exposed to with the Akashic Records. I've been one of those people where I don't know how not to be in the Akashic Records. I don't know how to not be like this. I was not trained. I've had no training to do this. It's just, you know, I've had things that I have done to open up my intuition, like the Kundalini yoga. And I've studied with Alana Fairchild, who's an amazing divine being. And she is really, you know, in her programs held the space for a lot of healing for me to be able to do what I'm doing now. And so, but I've never like taken a Akashic record course. And the reason I finally figured it out is I had a beautiful psychic medium in LA who I was in a healing circle with, and she was holding my hand. And after we did like the opening ceremony, she turned to me and she's like, oh my God, you're reading the Akashic Records. Because she reads the Akashic Records, and she was like, She sees it as a book unfolding. Like she literally sees a book. Like I don't see the book. Sometimes I see the book, but for me, it's more of a direct channel. And what, going back to like, what even are the Akashic records? Because I feel like so many people in high spiritual communities don't even know the definition of it. And the Akashic records very simply is the library of high vibration where every soul's blueprint is kept. So we have access to the past, to the parallel timelines and dimensions, and we can see future possibilities. Now, when we say future, it is possibilities because nothing is set in stone because of human free will on this planet and in others, I'm sure, too. Above the crown is the seventh chakra, and the soul star chakra in most traditions is the eighth chakra, like right above it, right here. And many people say that the Akashic records are kept in your soul, like your Akashic records are kept in your soul star chakra. So, and then there's the big vast library that we can enter into another dimension to see, like, it's like a hall of records, if you will. For me also too, I have felt the Akashic records in my body. So some people even feel like sometimes I feel like they're at my heart center. They're the heart of who I am. Like I'm losing my voice on that one. Wow.
Wow.
It's like, okay, yeah, like it's the heart of who I am. And what I have seen is that when I talk about past lives, I'm more or less talking about not in a linear sense whatsoever. I'm just talking about almost like more of a lifetime that's been completed. Personally, I feel all timelines are running simultaneously, and some are complete. Some are actually looking for transformation and change, even if they are complete. I feel like I'll give a shout out to Sandra Ann Taylor. She is a beautiful channel, and her Akashic record book. And I actually was privileged to like do a seminar with her last year where she took us into the Akashic records, and we were able to go into lifetimes and change the scenario. So I do some of that work. Sometimes it's not even necessary to do the actual, like I sit down and do a formal meditation, because a lot of times what I've been told is us just revealing what is this relationship. So the deeper understanding within the soul and the cellular structure is then able to be like, oh, it's like the subconscious mind are working with like the familiarity of the situation that has not consciously been present for the client. And they're like, oh, I get this. This is so okay. Now I understand. And like that understanding brings healing too. So
yeah, that's amazing. So to make sure that I understand as well. So the Akashic records, because I had this understanding, maybe it just like keeps the record of all the past lives you've ever had, but it sounds like it's so much more than that. It's really related to assuming that each one of us humans living have a soul, which I also believe, but who knows? So that every soul really has like a history of multiple lifetimes that they have lived. And as you say, maybe are concurrently living. And this is like the record hall that kind of keeps track of all of that.
Exactly.
How did that begin? Like, how do we know that's there? How do we even know that the records exist?
Oh, for me, I'm only going to speak from my personal experience, because I was seeing past lives when I was a very small child. Like I had already known that I had lived in other places. I would watch, for example, this is one of those synchronistic moments. I grew up in upstate New York. I grew up in Syracuse, New York. And so I would watch the Macy's Day Parade every year, on TV. And I would be, I'd be like, I'm going to go home. And I ended up taking a trip with my mom down to the city, like when I was 5 years old, with some of her friends. And I remember walking down, 34th Street to Macy's, and being in Herald Square. And I was like, oh, finally I'm home. And like the strangest part is, this was the 60s, so things are a little bit more, liberal in a way around. And I'm using that as like, okay, my mother and her friends wanted to go to have a cocktail, so they just brought me to the bar, you know?
Yeah.
And that's my definition of it, you know, a little bit more elastic, let's say. And so I remember, though, at 4 to 5 years old, sitting in this bar in Manhattan, in New York City, with my mother and her two friends, and then being like, oh, now I'm really home. It was the thought that came through. And so, you know, I've been having those experiences for a long time. And part of it caused a lot of confusion because of the roles of women changing. And for me, I've really tapped into working with and working through and healing, in particular, 2 lifetimes. They were set in the late 18th century, one of them mid to late 18th century. Another one was set in the early 20th century. And so those were times where the roles of women and the laws around women even were very different. And I can remember being so confused as a child of like, what is my role? Especially because I was growing up in the late 60s and the early 70s, where there was such a big emphasis on the roles of women in society.
It's like you have these inclinations. I mean, you have a very unique like relationship to the Akashic Records, as we are now hearing, and as I'm sure we're going to hear more about. But it is almost like all those inklings or ideas or beliefs or things that we might have just as humans that don't logically make sense might have their role in the past.
Oh, absolutely.
Like I can say from my side, I remember in particular, so I used to work in wildlife conservation, and I would travel a lot to like the most remarkable, beautiful, natural places in the world. I mean, really, I have goosebumps even talking about it. It was so phenomenal. And I remember I was going to a meeting in Guatemala, and we had the meeting in Antigua, which is like the old city of Guatemala. And I arrived and I was home, and I had never been before, and I couldn't explain it. And it was it was a deep sense of coming back home. And I remember in particular, the hotel we were staying in, there was something really specifically in that ground. My God, I have goosebumps everywhere now. But there was something, really particular in the ground of exactly where that hotel was that it just felt so sacred. I could not explain it. I couldn't put words to any of it, but it was just such a powerful, moving moment in my life.
This is the magic of us being such multidimensional beings, of, you know, so many fractals that can incarnate from our oversoul. So we have so many versions of who we are and what all of them can share and integrate into this great process of ascension, if you will.
So there may be some people who are listening that are still not sure if they believe in like reincarnation or having multiple lives. So I just wonder, how would you describe this to someone who maybe doesn't fully buy into the concept?
People have their beliefs, and you can't change them.
Yeah.
Okay. Because reincarnation is tied into a strong religious belief. On one side, like with the Indian, you know, through the Hindu, they believe in transmigration, right? And which is not only like have we had human lives, but we've had lives as animals too. And so, and then we have other religions that don't believe in reincarnation at all. This is a one-time deal. And I'm not here to convert non-believers, but what I would say is the connection that you have to the divine, however you describe that, wouldn't you want to experience that more than once? That would be my question to them. And then say, and if you do, just begin to reflect upon how you have done that potentially in other versions of yourself and of your soul.
I think that's beautiful. There's also what you said just at the very beginning, and I think that maybe has a lot to do with it, because also the idea of reincarnation, for many has been tied into religious aspects that a lot of people don't believe in, or they were brought up in a certain religion or a certain way of believing, and it kind of ruins your perspective on what spirituality can be or what it means to be a spiritual being. So I mean, I wasn't brought up in a religious household, but I know many people who were, and they're taught a very specific way of believing. And if you didn't believe that, then you start to grow up and think, okay, no, none of this is for me. So I think what I hear from what you're saying also is just be open to the fact that we don't know a lot.
Yeah, we
and
don't.
There's a lot that could be possible. And why not just explore and experiment to see what else could be there, what else could be true.
Absolutely. And I was raised in one of those households. I was raised in a fairly strict Catholic household that did not believe in reincarnation and did not believe in anything that was happening to me. So, so it made for an interesting journey for me not to have any support, and the opposite of it, a complete discouragement of it and a hiding of it. And so I understand, people who may be like even curious about things, and it's like, but that doesn't like rectify with what I was taught. And so I think people are really coming into a merging right now of all the different possibilities of what we have been taught and what is out there that we have no idea what's even possible, right? And it's all coming together now. It can be that are very religious. I've seen them opening up to the possibility of like, oh yeah, sometimes I feel like I've been here more than once, or I've had this experience where I went to Egypt and it was just like home, or, on and on and on.
I love that. So I'm glad that we brought that in. I know that's not the specific aim for the conversation, but I do think it's fascinating just the amount of people that I meet also through my coaching practice, and just where those lines, there's a lot of curiosity, and there's just an uncertainty of like what to do with it or what to believe, who to believe.
There is literature that says that Origen, who was a prophet, I believe, and he wrote a lot of gospels, and he wrote a whole gospel on reincarnation, and it's as something that is happening to us as souls. But it didn't quite make it into the version of the Bible that Constantine and the Pope at that time developed. We know that there may have been writings prior to that. So, that's just another.
Ooh.
Yeah. So that's another option to keep open about, because we know that things were buried. Yeah. We're looking at the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, right? And everything at Nag Hammadi. So maybe someday the Gospels of Origen will show up and we can talk about reincarnation from that perspective, which I would love. Maybe let's manifest that.
Yeah. Okay, we're ready now.
Yeah, we're ready.
Bring it on.
Yeah.
So something that you mentioned as well, like just in terms of the healing potential of this kind of work, what's possible there? What does healing look like in what you do and the kind of work that you do?
Oh, the healing that I'm involved with equals transformation. Like healing equals transformation. The way that I've come to this planet is to be of the greatest assistance to all of humanity. And whether that's through individual, one-on-one consultations or a group consultation, it doesn't matter, or just a prayer in a ceremony. This is why I'm going to Glastonbury in Scotland, right? And what this transformation is about is for the evolution of the soul to be able to access its full potentiality, or at least its highest potentiality and divine destiny in this lifetime. So we are here to be able to really walk through this beautiful earth plane as souls embodied.
So now let's get into the meat of this. So we've got the Akashic Records, which you can read. What's really possible here? So if someone's coming in and they say, okay, I want to have a session, what is actually happening in that space?
For years, I've called myself an equal opportunity channel as long as you're of unconditional love. So I also have a Celtic shamanic background. And so I worked with the four directions and the five elements and the four archangels associated with those directions. And so before I begin a session, I always call, I clear the space, of course, and then I call all of them in. And at that point, they begin to open up the Akashic records for me. And I begin to see things, and I'll see guides. And I'll start with the direction of east and then go east, south, west, and north. So there'll be, at that point, I can see lifetimes. I can see potential guides coming in with the message. Sometimes I hear a phrase that is supposed to be like a new mantra for them, or, a mantra about like or I'll hear like, oh, you have this new group of guides who are now called blah, blah, blah. So it could be anything. That's the thing about the Akashic Records. It could be anything. It could be anything. And, I've had words come out of my mouth that I didn't even know what the words were, and I didn't think they existed. And people would be like, oh, those are the nationalities of my wife. And I was like,
oh, wow.
I'm like, I don't even know what I just said. I don't even know like that this was like a nationality. Anything can come through. It's what is most important at that moment in time for the transformation of the soul to be able to, go to the next potential of their divine destiny. And then what I'll do is I'll be on a Zoom call with them. I do almost everything in Zoom. And we will just open up the records. I use a Mayan prayer that was translated into English by a woman named Linda Howe. That to me feels like, even though I've gotten everything else, we use the client's legal name, and that grounds the space. And they're participating together with me. And then whatever I see, first and foremost, and sometimes like what I've seen when I've called in the directions and the elements won't be the thing that I see when I open up the record. And so I'm like, okay, we're starting here. And then we go. So it's really, but I do, now I've been really encouraging people to come with questions, because Spirit has really gotten, just like, instead of like a direct channel all the time, yes, they get a channeled message at the beginning. Sometimes it could be a half hour. Sometimes it'll be 5 minutes. And depending on like the length of the reading, and also it depends on, what's important at that time. And sometimes Spirit's like, we're done. Tell them to ask questions. Their questions are more important. Within there's a lot of flexibility. It's about anything. It's like, okay, I have 2 job offers. What's the energy around this? What's the energy around that? And I also do support with oracle cards too.
I was wondering if people come, like, just keep coming back trying to figure out every lifetime, they just keep coming and they're like, okay, I'm ready for more, and then more, and then
it's not just like people are curious about their lifetimes at all. It's more that people are curious about like, what is going on in my relationship with this person at this moment. And then it's like, oh, okay, let's see what happened. Were they in a lifetime together? What was the situation? We do a healing around that. Sometimes Spirit will give them a prayer, a mantra, a ceremony, a forgiveness practice, whatever it is, to help to reconcile and heal the lifetime and the relationship, both past and current, with this other individual. Also, too, it comes in when I have women who are pregnant, or about to be pregnant. Like the soul, there may be at least one soul that comes in and starts talking to the mother about who they are. And a lot of times they are from another lifetime. So we talk about that, the lifetime that these two have had together, and how that they can utilize the wisdom and the joy or the pain from that lifetime and really integrate it into this lifetime to bring in a higher vibrational experience, as well as a beautiful, joyous reunion.
I had a reading recently with a psychic medium who I know her pretty well. She's very talented. And I had a question in my mind. I was thinking, are there questions that I want to ask her? Or is there something specific? And when we got into the reading, she just was in a flow right
Mm-hmm.
away and just all these things. And then I could tell it was starting to wind down. And I said, I forget, like, I just said, I actually have one more question. She's like, oh my God, thank God you brought that up, because she was basically saying it had been in her mind all morning, but she didn't know if it was an appropriate thing to actually
Yeah.
talk to me about.
Yes.
So she wanted to wait. And then once I asked the question, she was like, okay, good. And then, went on for like another 20 minutes about all the wisdom and insight that was there around it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that happens a lot. A lot of people will say to me, like, because we just open the space and I start talking and the guys are coming through and they're like, well, you just answered all my questions.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, I guess I sent them in advance.
Yes. Yeah. Spirit knows.
Yeah, I can imagine. So, how did you get started actually working as an Akashic record reader? I know that's not the only term for what you do, but I would love to hear how did you begin in this line of work?
Oh, I was pushed and shoved into it because I did not want to do it. I really
Yeah.
didn't. I'm definitely a reluctant healer. And that's that's one of my things in this lifetime, that I'm healing. And I've dived into many lifetimes and done the healing work with this because I've had it over so many lifetimes. It's a huge soul pattern for me. I was working with an amazing healer in LA when I moved to LA in 2000. And that was something that I was absolutely divinely guided to do because I had heard 12 years before that I needed to move to LA before March 11th, 2001. Like it was so specific because my birthday's March 11th. And so Spirit kept on saying, you have to live in LA before that. Things synchronistically showed up. It's like, oh, I had another friend that wanted to move to LA at the exact same time. So we made the plans and blah, blah, blah. The relationship I was in, that ended. So it was like, I was free to go. I had no ties to New York City anymore. It ended up being a huge destiny point for me because I really didn't have any interest in the healing arts. I was in theater and entertainment and costumes. And so that was my bag, and that's why I thought I was moving to Los Angeles. And
I could understand why.
Yeah, I have a career. I did have a career in that where I worked in theater and I was a star dresser and I worked with amazing, amazing talent in opera and dance. The prima ballerinas, the diva opera singers, also in theater and musical theater. So, I had a great career. But there was always this on the side. And the healer I was working with, she kept on telling me, she's like, you can read, you are, you can see things. And she would if she was questioning things, sometimes I would go for my session and she'd be like, can you answer this question? So she, I'm giving her a reading. And I know I've been in situations like that where I've gone to group circles and it's like, I end up giving people readings. But she's like, no, you need to start really focusing on giving readings. And I had, the right friends at the right time. They were like, we know you've got it. And they were like, just give me a reading and we'll just donate. And that's how I started. I just started, with friends and having donations. And I've been very blessed. My business is very much word of mouth. The more that I dive into it, it just amazes me on and on. And being practicing Kundalini yoga, being a Kundalini yoga teacher, that opened up my third eye and my crown like nobody's business. That was my access. That was my gateway. Within Kundalini yoga, they talk about the 10 gurus that are from the Sikh tradition, the Sikh religion in India. And so, it's very much tied into that energy because of these lifetimes. And so it just was something that just clicked open and really opened me up to be able to bring through. And of course, everything that I do, I'm still on this healing journey every single moment. And everything that we do, it just opens us more and more and more and more. that's how I began.
I wonder with so Kundalini yoga, I mean, I guess people have heard of that and Google it if you don't know that much, but no, I'm just curious, how did that help open you up more? Because it seems to be like yes, of course it did, but why?
Kundalini yoga it's called the yoga of awareness. And so it is not like, we don't do sun salutations, we don't do, it's not a vinyasa flow. It's focused on some kind of sometimes crazy exercises that are all directed to open up the third eye. It's all about opening up the pituitary gland, opening up the third eye, open up the pineal, so that we can access more of our intuitive nature and balance the head with the heart.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense.
Right. Because I had been practicing all kinds of other, hatha, Ashtanga style yogas prior to that. But that was for me personally, and we all have our own ways of going about it. But that was my personal journey, was through that specific modality and that tradition. And then that led me into priestess work. And then it led, and on and on and on. So, yeah.
It kept opening the door further.
Yeah, totally opening the door for me.
Yeah, so that's also interesting, because I know from your sharing that you've always sort of been connected to this energy, and you could always see things, and maybe as a kid couldn't contextualize it, especially if you were growing up in a particularly religious household where you wouldn't have had many people to even ask questions of what is actually going on here. And I think a lot of people who I'm encountering, probably people who are listening, also the clients that I work with, a lot of people are coming into their role as maybe a healer or a guide or a coach of some kind for others, kind of like midway into their career. So they've had these successful, corporate careers, worked their way up to leadership. And I was always trying to find a name for what that phase of life is. I was just calling it like the third chapter, it's like a phase. It's not quite midlife, but you've reached this point where you've kind of checked all the boxes of what it is that you wanted to achieve. I've noticed a lot of these clients who come into me are actually healers, not on the outside, not to anyone else. They don't really know it, but there's this point where it's almost like the awakening is starting to happen. I don't know if it's in your 30s or 40s. And then coming out in the world as that already as an adult is quite a hard journey for so many. There's like a big contrast there. I mean, maybe it's not even that much of a contrast, because you've had to step into your journey every step along the way. But for someone who's maybe just starting to access this sort of world of spirituality later in life, I know it's not really that much later in life, but just as more of an adult, what kind of wisdom could you share with them about this journey?
Well, I was definitely there. That's what my journey was, because, it's like, okay, I'm going to be like full disclosure here. I moved to LA when I was 40 years old. 2001 date, I turned 40. I thought my career was going to be, to me, the yoga was great. I enjoyed it. It made me feel good. And then the healing was great. She was doing energy work with me. That was great. Never thought it. And I just feel like, listen to your intuition. It doesn't necessarily have to be like, you're going to work with a healer. And sometimes like setting up a healing business is not for that person's best and highest good. Because I do see people who are in corporate America who are absolutely light workers and healers. I mean, and I was there myself. So I traveled that road. My life dressing someone to get them on a stage in front of, 3,000 to 10,000 people, and to give the best performance of their life to, because that's their job, that's their role. People have their ups and downs, and you're just holding the space for them to be in that highest potential of their divine destiny at that moment. And so I feel that also is something that goes over into the corporate, because I have clients who are like, oh yeah, they feel guilty that they even like their corporate job, some of them. And it's like,
Yeah, I
no,
see.
no. They're like, I know, but I have all, and they do. They have all these magnificent healing talents. I'm like, you're there for a reason. And that reason is you're bringing light into a situation, into a department, into a corporation, into an industry, into the world. You'll be guided when it is time to leave. For people who are starting out, one thing to do is healer, heal thyself. You start on that journey. Healer, heal thyself. And then you are able to, you'll be led, you'll be guided to bringing in the clients, to bringing in the contacts, to bringing in the networks, and on and on and on. And, a lot of times I can only speak from my personal experience. I feel for me, that was the pivotal moment for me to be able to do this now. Also, too, for me, I lost my career in 2020, and Spirit was very clear within 1 month that I was living in Los Angeles. And it was very clear within 1 month, they're like, the theater's going to be done. It's going to be closed for almost 2 years. Do you want to just sit here and wait and pay rent?
Yeah, good luck. Yes.
And so I picked myself up and moved across the country because I had opportunities here to be able to have financial freedom, to have more freedom to do this work, to do my own healing work. And, it turned out to be a good move for me. So we just, what looks like a great loss, and these are for the people who might be in those corporate situations. What looks like what it might be the loss is actually one door closing and a window opening, right? So just look for those open windows.
I love that. Even though you've had these abilities your whole life, it wasn't that you were working it professionally. You weren't, I mean, maybe you were here and there, but it wasn't, that you actually were still pursuing your ambitions, your career ambitions, everything else. And like, this was still just knocking on the door.
Oh, yeah.
I think that is what happens for a lot of people. They, especially if they've had these gifts for a long time and have either been ignoring them or maybe haven't been so fully aware, but we think we're supposed to live a certain kind of life and the people around us aren't doing those things. So there's a lot of fear around it.
Oh, yeah.
The word that I use and that I hear the most often is like coming out of the closet.
Oh,
it's like
totally.
You're hiding, no one knows. And then there's a moment you actually have to cross that threshold and be like, okay, here I am, because there's work to be done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And even for me, even now, even today, there are certain people that it's still a process of like, well, maybe I'm sort of out of the closet, but in certain situations, it's just not appropriate to come fully out of the closet. It isn't safe for me because there isn't the understanding there. And so everybody has to use that, has to have that form of protection around like what is appropriate for me, what is appropriate for me to share. And because sometimes with healers, they just, especially at the beginning, everybody wants to heal everybody, like the healer wants to heal everyone. Everybody, why wouldn't you want this?
Yeah.
Come on. And it's like,
I'm ready.
I'm ready. How come you're not ready? And so what I've really found is like over the years, it's the subtlety of the message. And sometimes people will come at me and they'll be like, I think I have something in my house. Can you clear my house? And their kids, I can't tell their kids because their kids will think that she's crazy. The mom's crazy, right? She's like, don't tell my daughter what you're doing. And here I am smudging the house and saying prayers. She's like, And so, we're still in that space as humanity. But I love the fact that people are even willing to, and this is part of it. Sometimes, like for me, you just are tired of being miserable or living in a miserable space. And it's like, okay, I will surrender and do whatever it takes to do this healing work. And that is the growth. That's where the growth comes from.
Also, as a healer, knowing to meet people where they are. So you can still do the healing and, of course, honor. And as you're saying, when you're newer, you're just excited. Like, I can do all these cool things. Come on. I mean, my husband's a very willing, student. I don't know, willing, whenever I'm learning something new, like a new shamanic practice or something, I'm like, can I give you a psychic reading now? Like, can we do a healing session? I think there's a power animal that wants to come in, and he's very willing
Oh, I love
to be a participant.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
Well, I realize it's very funny in our particular relationship because he doesn't follow this path in the same way, right? But he reads his like fantasy and sci-fi, and sometimes I'll come up with terms and he's like, oh yeah, I know that, and I know how this and this and this works, and I'm like, I don't know anything about it. I'm just learning. So could you educate me on all of these, witchy things that you've been reading about for the last, 2 or 3 decades?
Oh, I love it. Look at the sources that are bringing in this magic in all of its ways. Oh. So, it can be through what we think is a sci-fi book. It could be, there's so much media, there's so much TV out there. There's, on YouTube, there's like right now, there's so much compared to when I was growing up. There was nothing. Like we had the daily horoscope in the newspaper.
Yeah.
That was it. You had to go really digging for the esoteric and the supernatural. So at the high levels of it.
And if you were to say, because you mentioned earlier that you've been very fortunate that your business has grown largely through referrals, which I 1,000,000% believe and also understand just being in your presence. How would you say, what made that possible, or how did that happen for you? I mean, aside from being an exceptional reader and giving your heart and soul, how do you build your business in that way?
Well, I'm at a place of being in trust, really. And it's been like, that's a huge lesson for me soul-wise, is to be in trust and to surrender. And I can do tons of marketing. I can do tons of social media, and all I hear are crickets.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden I give one reading to one person, and then I have boom, 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 people calling me. I've just been in a place of flow the whole entire time. And for me, I was, I laugh we talk about the gig economy. I was like in the original gig economy, being in theater, right? Because theatrical productions can be anywhere from 2 years to 2 days. And so, I was doing my theater work. I was teaching yoga, and then I'd be doing this, and then I'd be holding like divine feminine, Mary Magdalene groups. I was just doing everything. I'm a person who just is really like, okay, being guided by spirit to do the next thing. And I know I have friends who, they like download curriculums of things, and that's not my path. My path is like one step at a time, and all will be revealed. And for us, as an exercise, it is in integrating with our highest divine destiny through listening to the messages and the synchronicities. For me, when I went to Costa Rica, all of a sudden I had 3 friends who were going to Costa Rica in 1 week. And I'm like, okay, that's a sign. And so I was like just meditating on it. I was praying, like, just bring me to where I'm supposed to be in Costa Rica. The right group, the right place. I was actually on like retreatguru.com because looking for retreats in Costa Rica, because I'm like, I know I have to go. What is this? And I kept on hearing I was traveling in May, and I originally thought I was going to Glastonbury in Scotland in May. My friend couldn't go. She's like, no, we have to go in September. I'm like, well, I'm going somewhere in May. I don't know where it is. And then all of a sudden, I go to a tea ceremony, and my friend, who is a beautiful shaman and tea ceremony person and Kundalini yogi, she's like, I'm announcing for the first time tonight publicly that I'm leading a group to Costa Rica at the end of May. And I was like, yeah, sign me up.
There it is.
There it is. And I did some of the most intense and deep healing in ceremony there. In Costa Rica, like, I loved it. It opened my heart to, and for me, it was deep ancestral patterning going back 10 generations. That's a part of what I'm here to do. Is I am working in different directions through my ancestral, healing my ancestral lines.
When you're in alignment, when you just keep following the guidance and you keep following the path, which is it's really hard to do for me, I know, and I'm assuming for many others, to just let go and trust what comes in, and that all is revealed in the time. And I'm hearing that's really been, first of all, a big part of your journey, but also what has made it flow.
Oh, definitely.
And what has made it all work.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. And it will remain doing that. And the thing is, we have to trust in spirit, because we're all here for a purpose, and we can all exit at a specific time when the soul is ready, when we feel that we've done what we've needed to do. And yet at the same time, we will be able to keep going through whatever we're led. And the thing is, too, I want to make the point about, you don't have to be psychic. You don't have to be clairvoyant or clairaudient or clairsentient. You don't need any of that to know that you are being guided. It's the prayer. You put the prayer out there. And I know even prayer at times can be a loaded word. You can put the words of creation out there, asking to co-create your intention with a higher divine power of your understanding, or not. Because somewhere you will be met with that, especially if it's for your best and highest good and the best and highest good of all. So that, I feel like for healers that are out there, look at what's being presented to you. Is somebody talking about the same book? Have you heard about the same book 2 or 3 times? Time to read it. Have you been drawn to this? I was given this great guidance by an amazing priestess, and she's like, it's time for you to start following your passion. And I feel like that is something that all of us, and I know that gets a lot of, well, I have to pay my bills. Yes, we do. And believe me, I have a Capricorn stellium, which is about, being grounded and in business and making money and being responsible and committed, right? And yet at the same time, in its highest vibration, it's about spiritual maturity and the devotion to the divine through commitment and through discipline. So, I get both ends, and it's like, you don't have to quit your job, but it's about not rejecting the guidance that you're being given in whatever form it's coming, because both are going to work with you and integrate into an experience. Because here, I thought I was going to be in theater another 6, 7, 8 years. That was my game plan. And it's like, nope. Spirit's like, nope, hit the highway.
It's funny, whenever I have any kind of reading or I'm working with a healer, I always get the messages to definitely, follow my sacral. It will always tell me, like, very clear yes or no, which it always does, that I don't actually like to work hard, and that whatever I'm doing should not feel like hard work. And I'm like, you should see my beautiful plans and to-do lists and checklists and everything. And I always get this guidance, and I'm like, shit.
Yeah.
Time for a recalibration there.
Yeah. I've also been told that too. And so especially, because people in my past have always said, no matter what career, because I was in corporate America for a minute. And so I've had that experience. And, I've always been told, like, you're such a hard worker. You're such a hard worker. And then I go and have readings, and people are like, stop working so hard. And the worst part is, like, because of the culture that we live in, being a hard worker is how you get the jobs and get rewarded, particularly if you're like me, where you're not like in a job that could go on for 30 years when you're running gig to gig to gig. Yeah, so I understand, like, trying to find that balance. And that's what I'm experimenting with now, with what I'm doing, with just offering the readings and the healing work.
Well, that's a gorgeous segue, because I just wanted to ask, how can people work with you? What do you offer? How do they get in touch with you? Why did they get in touch with you?
Well, first and foremost, If you're listening to this or if you're watching this, if it resonates with you, anything I've said, my energy, then that to me is always a sign like, okay, maybe this is somebody I want to work with. You can officially get in contact with me at marciacanestrano.com. It's all one word, lowercase, and you can reach me at the email marciacanestrano@gmail.com. And once in a while, I do post a little bit on Instagram and Facebook at Shakti Soul Coach. So, you can find me there too.
I'm going to link to all of that in the
Perfect.
show notes. So if you didn't write it down, don't worry. You can click the show notes in this episode and get it all.
Right. Right. And the thing is that I offer, yes, most people are there for the Akashic Record readings. I do body code work, which is through Dr. Bradley Nelson. We've been getting great results with that. With my clients, and we can work from anything with, like, if you have a pain in your body to prosperity. So it's not like just limited to the physical form. I also do a technique. I'm not a Reiki person. I'm certified through Alana Fairchild to do something called the Kuan Yin transmission. And so that is a beautiful form of healing work that I also do. And I'm like, yeah. And of course, if you're in Florida, in this Tampa Bay area, I do teach Kundalini yoga at a yoga village, so you can check me out there too. So
that's maybe a good enough reason to go to Tampa and take a Kundalini yoga class.
Yes, besides our beautiful, beautiful beaches here, the best of all worlds. And also too, what I've really found is I'm trained through David Elliott in a shamanic breathing modality. We called it the healing breath. The woman who trained me, she trained through David Elliott, and he was actually the one who wrote the book, The Reluctant Healer. So it's interesting that a decade later, I'm actually taking something that comes out of his wheelhouse. And so that I have found this year is really, I can do individual and I can do that online. But I've been holding groups here because the pranayama in this 8 year is really about the breath. And that's one of the big messages that's been coming through, is to work with the breath. So anyone who is out there, like, that's the message. Any kind of breath work that you want to do, I feel like that's a great gateway of healing for 2024.
So we're coming to the end of our conversation. I just want to ask if there's any other bit of insight or wisdom that you feel could be helpful to those listening, aside from everything amazing you've already shared.
Well, thank you. Wow. It's like, put me right on the spot here. Oh, I know what I'm going to do. There we go. I'm going to give Rebecca Campbell a shout out. I love her Oracle decks. I love Alana's Oracle decks. This is one of the ones that I use. It's Work Your Light Oracle deck. This is my favorite. I don't even know the name of it because I've looked at it in years. I just use the deck. But I want to get Rebecca. She's an amazing healer. If you're into that kind of work, highly recommend her. I highly recommend Alana Fairchild. If you love the decks, buy one Oracle deck. If you like tarot, buy a tarot deck. Start experimenting. And we're in a place right now where there are so many opportunities, because I know we touched on this earlier. Back even in the 80s, it was really hard to, you could buy a book if you could find the right bookshop. I can tell you in upstate New York, there weren't very many bookshops that had astrology books. Okay. Or books on the elements or on shamanism. So, we are at a place now where you can find the tarot course or the healing course or, whatever it is that you are feeling interested in, and you can explore that. And so I highly encourage everyone, if they're getting the nudge does not go away, by the way. And Doreen Virtue, I'll give Doreen Virtue a shout out too. I remember listening to her, 25 years ago on the radio in LA. And she was like, I have these clients, they're 85 years old and they still are telling me they've got the nudge that to write that book, to go on that trip. She's like, you don't escape it. And so I agree with her. So anyway, here's how we're going to end. We're going to end with a message from Spirit. And so, oh, I love it. Okay, pillar of light. So this is be your own oracle. You are the pillar of light. You are, this beautiful connection with the divine, with your cosmic starseed self, and with your earthly soul embodied form connected to Mama Gaia. And so you have the potential, we all have the potential to connect through and through, particularly through the cosmic chakra system, going all the way down into the earth chakra system. And we are here to be our own oracles, to listen to our own divine guidance. No one on this planet, doesn't matter what belief system they have, is walking by themselves without some divine assistance. And so we are all here, particularly the light workers, the healers, the light bearers, the way showers, to be the foremost pillar of light, the beacon, to bring through this high healing energy from not only the heavens, but from earth. And there is in some of the esoteric teachings, it is this reclamation of the Lemurian energy of bringing heaven back to earth and being in this paradise of what I have seen is one of the original potential blueprints for this planet. So there we go. And so it is, blessed be.
That is the perfect message to close off this beautiful conversation. I appreciate all the wisdom that you shared, and I think a lot of food for thought for people wherever they fall on the spectrum of their healing and their own gifts, but there's definitely a lot of hope and wisdom for people to be able to embark on their own journey here and deepen what it is that they probably already know to be true on some level.
Yes. And so, follow the nudge, follow your passion. And I don't mean that in a trite way. I mean that in just a fun, explorative, maybe it'll lead to something big. Maybe it'll just make you happy for a minute or two. But even that energy of joy to this planet and gratitude, you are a healer there when you're bringing that vibration to this energy field. So thank you, Amanda. It's been amazing to chat with you today, and I'm so grateful for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Marcia. I am also grateful to have you here, and everyone who is listening, thank you so much for tuning in to Don't Step on the Bluebells, and see you next time. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of Don't Step on the Bluebells. If you enjoyed this conversation, please give the podcast a 5-star rating wherever you listen. And don't forget to hit subscribe and follow along so you never miss a new episode.